Yo, welcome back to Evil Scuba Diver. Today we're talking about every single album I listened to in the month of February 2025. We listened to a lot of albums even though we were given sort of a premature month here. I mean, February kind of gets cut off at the feet. It doesn't really have that last 3 days of closure. Every month sort of does need to seem natural. But we did listen to a lot of albums and we did play quite a bit of Fortnite for this video here. So you know the drill. I'm just going to talk about them, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I hated. And you are going to sit down, get yourself a nice little meal. Maybe you're gonna puff on a cart or some shit, and you are going to absolutely love what you're consuming. And as a month, February itself, I mean, I feel pretty good about it. It was a very cathartic month for me, creatively. I kind of figured out that stuff wasn't going how I wanted it to. I sort of had to pivot a little bit in terms of how I was thinking about stuff, and just sort of had to analyze where does my passion actually lie when I'm living life day to day. And I'm figuring that out. So February was a weird month because I had this realization that I hadn't been as present as I wanted to be, but also February is a decently sized month. You got 28 days, so I put some of that stuff into action, and now I'm feeling optimistic that I'm on an interesting little journey, tangent, mindset, tangential path. Nobody cares. No, you guys will never get it, I guess. I guess for me though, February for me mentally very cleansing, very rewarding. This month was basically my own Darjeeling Limited or something like that. Take that how you will. We're gonna get into the albums actually right now because I'm talking too much. Okay, let's just do that. Heartbeat City by The Cars. Dope 80s pop classic album. You've probably heard this out. No, I shouldn't say that. Maybe you haven't heard this album, but people should know The Cars. I mean, they're pretty much the typical 80s, stereotypical 80s glam pop, disco balls spinning over the prom night. Who's gonna drive you home? That's The Cars, bro. And they released an album called Heartbeat City with some awesome singles like Drive and Hello Again, which is my favorite Cars song, and it starts off the album and it's really awesome. I think it might be their best song, but the album itself isn't really that great. Let me tell you why. The production is a little bit not there. There are moments where the drums and the synths and the bass on some of these songs, they don't come together and make music. They sound like they're trying to come together and make music. Everything is kind of strained and not working, and it's weird to have that experience when you're trying to listen to music, you know? Also found out the producer for this album low-key broke the band up, and he self-produced this thing for 8 months. And he coming out of it, he said himself it was stiff, and he wasn't proud of it, which is wild. Self-proclaimed stiff record, Heartbeat City by The Cars. I think that's kind of crazy. I guess a lesson to learn here is don't think too hard about your music. If you're catching a vibe, then most likely you've done your job already. And yeah, interesting little album to start out the month. Nothing too crazy, just a little throwback. Let's keep going. 2-Star in the Dream Police by McGee. 2-Star. People know this album probably for sure, but it fills me with just summer 2024 nostalgia, because that's when I really got into it, and I went for walks and shit, and I was just listening to the album and just breaking down the aesthetics and just really kind of being blown away and stuff, because the mutant sound effects, the field recordings, everything about it is so psychedelic. It all adds, and I gotta really geek out about the mixing too, just a little bit. I know I'm a nerd about it, but let me geek out. The way Are You Looking Up compared to Candy compared to New Low are all different mixes, and they're all getting different jobs done under the umbrella of this 2-Star sound is really, really awesome to me. Are You Looking Up is very close mic'd, just kind of claustrophobic drums, but in a way that makes the vocals sound really sort of just free and not queasy, but almost childish in a way. How meek the space is of the song and the way it's mixed just adds a different element to his voice, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, man, McGee's crafting a really cool, interesting sound that has more to do with sound design maybe than it does melody or music for some of these songs, Break the Spell at least, because everybody kind of knows what a good melody sounds like and how to play guitar to some extent, but to really make a whole new world, a whole new atmosphere is pretty interesting. And the softer songs really strike me this time. Break the Spell, that will transport me to Australia in the middle of the outback with a nice cute girl I just met on this little vacation fantasy, and we go out and we smoke a J in the middle of the outback, and it's sunset, and there's windpipes in the distance, and you can see birds flying and maybe some kangaroos, and we're falling in love and shit. That's Break the Spell. That's a song right there. So yeah, that's what I got out of it this time around, and let's just keep going. Next album, Mount Eerie by The Microphones. This album's a weird one. This album is more of an audiobook, storybook, sound effect experience. The first song is 10 minutes of drums panning up and down in your headphones, and they're sounding very tribal and aggressive. It's not really exactly something you listen to for a melody. This isn't listening to Michael Jackson or anything. This is legitimately Phil Elverum, the main guy, basically taking your mind, putting it in headphones, and then trying to transport you to a little little world. And the world he creates here is this sort of, I want to say like Northman-esque Robert Eggers Viking village, and there's like a little boy who is played by the lead vocalist Phil Elverum, using his little boy voice, and he's hiding throughout the album from like giant flags and trumpets, and he's just basically really scared running around, and you get all these field recordings of like wind and fog and noise and bells and little vinyl crackles and bass and stuff, and it's just like it's an experience. It works really good for closing your eyes and thinking you're listening to something really interesting, though. It is pretty interesting. Close your eyes, put it on, you got a bunch of sounds wisping around everywhere. It's really cool. Honestly, wish it was longer. I mean, sound design is the main instrument here, and it's a really cool album for just like putting on, falling asleep to, visualizing an environment. So check it out, maybe, possibly. Oddities Sodomies Volume 1 by Ariel Pink. So if y'all know Ariel Pink, you probably know Pom Pom. That's the big album by him. But this is like one of his first albums ever made, if not his first, back when he was like a college student in the 1990s or early 2000s. I don't know. This is like Iraq War, Bush era Ariel Pink. I mean, he has like samples of Bush talking on some of these songs, and he's like sprinkling them in as like some sort of political commentary. I don't really know. But this whole album is so lo-fi. It's almost ambient. There's really nothing to hold on to here. There's no real like grooves or bass lines or like guitars or anything. It's sort of just this guy making zany demos with weird vocal inflections, almost borderline impressions, and then like recording it on a very lo-fi tape and like high passing and low passing everything and just making it sound sort of just like a kaleidoscopic lo-fi mush. That was a lot of words there, but I think it describes it pretty good. I mean, Ariel Pink is pretty prolific. He's made a bunch of albums in this sort of lo-fi style, but this is like his first venture, and this is pretty much just demo territory. This is one of those albums that you're not listening to for an album experience. You're listening to it because you just want to see the novelty of how some dude started out, and that's kind of what I got out of it. And yeah, he started out like the rest of us do, starting. So interesting enough listen. Glad it exists because it's the precursor for Pom Pom and like Sit and Spin and all these awesome songs. So this album's the seed, and I appreciate that. Let's keep going. I Laid Down My Life for You, Director's Cut by JPEG Mafia. Peggy dropped a director's cut, a DLC for I Laid Down My Life. And what are my thoughts? What am I feeling? Truthfully, I'm 50-50 on it. I think that Boy You Should Know is probably the best addition out of every. It beats out like some songs from the original album for me. Allah is a really good addition. I don't really think Cult Status needed to be there, but it's a cool addition for people who are kind of just looking for like DLC material and not stuff that's like enhancing the album, but more just like adding to it. And that's probably a good place to branch the conversation low-key, because do we want like deluxe albums that just add to the album, or do we want stuff that actually enhances it? I don't really know. I was looking for more of an enhancement, and what I got was just like addition. You know what I mean? Like we just threw a bunch of songs on here that were like OG versions of the originals and were like OG demos, and they're just here now. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because if I want to spin, you know, I Laid Down My Life for You front to back, I'd rather have a really awesome sort of concise experience, and I'm probably going to stick with the original album. But songs like Boy You Should Know and Allah, like I mentioned, man, those are bangers. Those are peak. I also think Jordan Rules is a really good one as well. I'm not really a big fan of the thin mixed like Protect the Cross. All those ones are not really my thing. Go without them, quite frankly. Also, a lot of the stuff on the B-side. Just give me like the 2 or 3 best songs from the DLC, put them onto the real album, and then I think he might have raised the score by like a 0.5 percentage. But Director's Cut really feels like more of a undirector's cut. You know what I mean? It feels like the album plus the scraps, not the real album. And that's how I feel about it. It's pretty cool. It's not holistically making the album better for me. I'm not like rushing to the Director's Cut before the original, but I am picking out 2 or 3 songs and placing them at very key places in my playlist or my track listing experience or something. So yeah, let's keep going. Moving Pictures by Rush. This is my first listen to this album all the way through, which is very surprising to me because my dad used to play this album in the car all the time when I was a kid. He actually took me to R40 when I was like 11 years old in Chicago. Shout out Dad. But yeah, there's memories attached to this album, and just listening to it all the way through, I did not realize how instrumental and progressive this album is, because the singles I really remembered off of this before listening to it fully were Tom Sawyer, Limelight, Red Barchetta. Pretty dope songs, pretty single heavy territory songs, right? But then you get into songs like Vital Signs and YYZ, and you're just like getting 7-minute instrumentals pedals with like progressive like rocks, time signatures, and just really interesting sort of weird like scenarios they bend and take you through. Bow, 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 bow. You guys know what I'm talking about there. If I do that stupid little noise, do you understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this album? Because that's also a cool portion of it as well. That's really all I can say about this album. Is that's my first listen to it. I'm like surprised with how instrumentally focused it is, and the production's killer. The production's awesome. I can understand why people in 1981 would go crazy over this. You know what I mean? The way those toms and those drum solos are hitting on Tom Sawyer. Vroom, 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 vroom. I can understand why you would want to be skiing on the slopes to some Rush maybe in 81 or something, right? Don't know if I condone it. Maybe I do because I'm evil, but I can definitely see the correlation there. But yeah, classic status little LP, right? Okay, next album. Hurry Up Tomorrow by The Weeknd. Mr. Weeknd is back with his third and final installment of his like little trilogy he's got going on. It was the Afro Face Looking At You album, it was the Old Guy Face Looking At You album, and now it's the Guy Screaming to the Side album. Like the other two albums, you have like the 80s dance revival stuff going on, like the pseudo Michael Jackson Thriller type of thing. I mean, that pretty much opens the album with the first song. It's pretty much that. But this album goes in a more psyched out EDM, like rave direction, sort of like dance territory, techno territory, stuff like, you know, Cry For Me Sao Paulo. Like that's really interesting to me. Open Hearts is pretty much just like a 2013 EDM banger, but just reglitzified, 2025ified to where it sounds more modern, you know, production wise and vocally and like melodically and all that sort of stuff. And I think it works really well when it works. When it doesn't work, it's the slowest, weirdest, most like emotionally disconnected I feel listening to The Weeknd, to be real. Because I'm not really emotionally connected to what Abel is saying when he's saying like, I'm back on the pills, back on the X and the O's. Like, I'm not really feeling that, especially when other songs he's like, EXO tatted all over her body, she just want to kick it with the guy, or so, I don't know. Point being, I can't really get invested when he's saying like, oh, if I OD with no heartbeat, will you be there for me type shit. Like it comes off to me as lyrics, not like some dude speaking from the soul. So the slower songs in this album and like the last half, like the people who got really into the last half of this album on like Twitter and like online and shit, who were like, oh my god, this is like the best arc ever. I didn't really get that. I felt like it just kind of, the album slowed down and just like went on for way too long. It really actually kind of depressed me, to be honest, because this album is an hour and 26 minutes. That is not something people are going to sit down and listen to all the way through for like an album experience every time. I mean, that's the type of album where you're shutting it off probably like the hour mark just because you're bored. If you want to make like an hour and 16 or 30 minute album or something, it needs to be like consistently different and like awe-inspiring every step of the way. Like maybe like To Pimp a Butterfly, or like maybe some like Songs in the Key of Life or something. And by the way, I sound like I'm being negative. I don't want to be negative. The first 6 songs of this album genuinely took me to a place. It's like the same energy as like when you walk into a movie theater for a Steven Spielberg movie or like an Indiana Jones, and like the first like 30 minutes you're just like, oh my gosh, I mean, this is an Indiana Jones movie, finally something awesome, right? It's the same type of energy when I played this album for the first time. It's like first 6 songs in, man, I'm in good hands. I'm on like a journey here. I'm on the roller coaster, right? But it just trails off. It's too long. Some stuff just doesn't connect. It really does just drop off from there, low key. It's like you put like a high pass filter on the whole album. And apparently the CD is all out of whack track list wise. It's got like 5 different album covers, 5 different track listings. All the track listings have different mixings. There's no transitions on the CD. It's like the weirdest little release ever. I don't know what the methodology is. Is it to make the CD like the concise version of the album, and the streaming version is the bloated but the transitioned one? Or I don't know. I really don't know. Because it seems like you can make a best of both worlds scenario pretty easily. Just cut down the album from an hour and 30 minutes, give it the same transitions, give it the same care and attention and track listing, and you have like a perfect album for everything, CD, vinyl, streaming. But he's making it so that streaming is completely different than CD, which is different than vinyl, I'm assuming, and there's bonus tracks sprinkled around the track list, not even at the end on some of these things. So it's like we're taking the same group of songs and making little mini different albums and then calling it the same thing and selling it. And I just don't really, that strikes me weird. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. When I ask people what they think of Hurry Up Tomorrow by The Weeknd, and I have to factor in that there's like a billion different versions, it doesn't really make me that excited to talk about it as like a body of work. Because is it a body of work if the work itself isn't put into a body. It's like spread out on a bunch of different platters. You know, it makes the album experience feel less like eating a 3-course meal and more like having a bunch of charcuterie boards and appetizers sitting around and you're just drinking beer. I don't know. It demystifies the album experience of Hurry Up Tomorrow for me, the way he's releasing it. And I yapped about that album a lot. But that's how I feel about that. So, yeah, we move on. Let's keep going. Fishing for Fishies by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. This album came out in 2019. This comes out after a year hiatus from King Giz. They took this year-long hiatus, mind you, because they released 5 albums in the span of 1 year in 2017, which, you know, I think it's a much-deserved hiatus when you release multiple albums in like a single year and they're all pretty interesting. Well deserved from them, but they come back with Fishing for Fishies, which is sort of like a simpler, more carefree, creative album about like nature and like environment and like keeping our fishes all happy and like our birds free and shit. It's pretty fun. It's a pretty nice time. It just emanates sort of a naturic quality. Is that a word? You know what? Let's just say it is. And you know, very carefree. Might I even say pleasant or awe-inspiring, you know? I mean, King Giz on this thing, they're getting kind of poppy, they're getting kind of fun, kind of uppity, kind of campy, and like giving you a wink at the camera, you know what I mean? Tongue-in-cheek, just like giving you the happiest little bops here. And the album ends with like a techno boogie banger. Like the whole album so far has been like slide guitars and more folky instrumentation, right? But the album ends with like a boom-ts, doom-ts, 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 just like bass, and it's like, oh, we're here now, and you're into it because it's like, I guess so. And I can't quite put my finger on why it makes sense. That's kind of why art exists, because you can't really tangibly put your finger on it, but it works. It works. It's like once that techno track starts after all this folk music, kind of folk adjacent, folk pop stuff, it's like, okay, that makes sense, I guess, for some reason. And then you're there and you're bobbing along and the album ends and it's a fun time, and it really is just like a fun album. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like the actual act of fishing. Like it gives me the same vibe as like going out fishing. It's a nice time. It's 5 hours in nature. It's pretty simple. It's not like going to Kings Island or anything. It's not like taking LSD and going to a rave and killing somebody and trying to get away with it. But it is like a nice humble time with your dad and your grandfather, and you're out on a little metal boat and you got the goofy little hats on and you're just in the baking sun, and that's just what this album feels like. Warm, cozy, type of simple fun. Remain in Light by Talking Heads. I listen to this album, seems like a lot every month. But this album I took a nap and the songs felt haunted, and that's really all I had to say. It was sort of like one of those half asleep nap album listens where can't really grasp on anything except I wrote that it felt haunted. So there you go. Next album, The New Sound by Jordy Greep. Everybody knows Greep, possibly. He came from Black Midi. He was the front man there. He was the dude singing and being all freaky or creepy. And he made this solo album where he is playing archetypes on every song. Every song, he's not Jordy Greep, but he's a character of an archetype of somebody who's maybe an insecure small little man who can't quite ever get love. And lyrically, it's a wild ride because it's just satirical. Everything about this album that you're hearing from Jordy Greep's voice is like the most outlandish thing you'd think you'd never hear from somebody who's trying to make serious or semi-serious music. I know people compare Greep to like Zappa, kind of the way he's like so satirical. You don't really exactly know his motivations, but his music is so good. Like his artistry and his playing is so insane that he can get away with it, right? But to me, this album's simpler motivation-wise than Zappa. It's pretty easy to see what he's doing here. He's just playing archetypes of people in culture, men who just don't really know how to operate around love or around women or just be real people. Because every character we're given, they yearn for love, and like the album cover, you know, they want love and they want it so bad, but on terms that are so bad that it just kind of reduces it to lust. Like all the men archetypes portrayed throughout this album are so unreal and are so not manly and are so afraid and insecure that their greatest concept of love really just amounts to lust and nothing. You know what I mean? Because they themselves are not even that secure enough to even unlock the emotion of what real love even truly is. That they can't even grasp it or understand it. They just think it's like, oh, touching her and like, oh, you know, no, dude, no, you got the whole thing wrong, but you'll never get it right because you're stuck in these ways. Like that's kind of what I get from the characters in this album. It's very tragic. But reversely, the instrumentals are the most beautiful, grand, like jazz, Latin flavored, just like very flavorful like instrumentals in this thing. Take a listen to Holy Holy, take a listen to Bongo Season, you might fuck around and get pregnant. Seth Evans, who does the vocals on Motorbike, actually produced this whole record, and I Fuck yeah, that's so crazy to me because these guys are like 20, 25. So you got Jordy Griep composing the music and you got Seth Evans producing and recording it, and it comes out to be one of the best albums of 2024 with the most ambitious instrumentals and ambitious lyrical concepts ever. And it's just two dudes who are like mid-20s and are having fun making music. If that doesn't show you the power of like what it means to just like be passionate about some random bullshit in your life and just like follow it, I don't know what does. Two dudes, one engineer and one composer, and they come together and they make music around the globe with a bunch of awesome musicians and record it to tape and release a beautiful album that I think is going to stand the test of time pretty well. I don't really see how this album ages poorly, to be real. I don't really see how it does. It came out in 2024, the perfect time where the male zeitgeist, the male sort of energy around was needed to be talked about, you know? I think Jordy did talk about it, and he talked about it very boldly and in a way that is very intriguing musically as well. I think he succeeded. So yeah, next album, Ghost in the Machine by The Police. This is also a really cool album to talk about for this month because this month was pretty cathartic for me. For those who don't have context, or people who don't follow my music stuff at all, you're just like on the Evil Scuba Diver channel because you love watching random white people on YouTube talk about other music and shit. Like, we don't have enough of those. Basically, I make music under Scuba Diver, and a lot of people like that music, and I was making an album for those people, and I kind of realized making this album at the very end stages, low-key, that it just wasn't great. I wasn't proud of what I was making. It wasn't gonna fulfill me to release it. And it hit me like at the start of the month, kind of when I turned 20. And it was a very cathartic period because I just got a year older. I just accumulated all this knowledge. I just reflected on my last like 5 months with this project and how I just wasn't feeling fulfilled creatively. And I sort of analyzed it, and I just took a step back and said, dude, this isn't working. This idea you're trying to capture or conquer or whatever you have in your head, I don't think you even really want it. You're just guiding yourself there out of habit. For 4 or 5 days after that sort of cathartic little realization, I wasn't really feeling that great, and Ghost in the Machine was sort of my like mental like med pack almost, and I would just listen to it a lot walking through campus every day, excuse me. Just walk around, listen to songs like Darkness, like Demolition Man, like Spirits in the Material World. Every little thing she does is magic, and it just sort of, it kind of healed me over time. And that sounds corny as hell because it kind of is, but that's how I think about it at least. And if my experience is corny, bro, then shit, bro, call me the Cobb. The song Destruction lyrically really hit me. There's a line on Darkness and it goes, the darkness makes me fumble to a point where I crawl and I cling onto a door that was wide open. If that lyric didn't live in my head for a little bit, clinging to a door that's wide open, I mean, what is that a metaphor for? You know what I mean? You're holding on to an idea of something instead of just like going out and just like experiencing. And sonically, man, the album just sounds great. Very airy. The drums are very light. They pop off the page almost, you know what I mean? It's a very weird style of production. There's nothing produced quite like a Police album. You know what I mean? Like Sting's vocals are like always a little bit too low and always have a little bit too much reverb, and the bass is always a little bit interesting, and the drums are always mixed. But like, there's not a lot of artists that you can look to, especially from like older days, and be like, yeah, that band had their own mixing style, or that band had their own like production style. You know, not just like, oh, they had cool guitar tones and their drums are cool, but like, no, the way they did their vocals and everything about their mixes was unique. That's kind of what you have with the Police, especially on Ghost in the Machine. I appreciate that a lot too. So next album, great album, check it out. Shit. Okay. Random Access Memories by Daft Punk. I have a theory this album might be the safest aux play of all time. It's a simple little dance album that is genius in the way that it's almost too simple. It's just the core elements of like dance music, and it works really well. But that's not to say there are not duds for me, because some of these songs do get a little too simple in my opinion, and that would be songs like Doing It Right and Motherboard. One thing with Random Access Memories that is pretty objective is that there's pretty much two ways to listen to it. There's the one guy who listens to Lose Yourself to Dance and goes, those drums are a bit too simple. Pharrell sounds a little bit too flat on that chorus, and the reverb isn't there, and it sounds kind of goofy, and the guitar is kind of plucky. Or you have the other guy in the room who's like, lose yourself to dance. It's like the meme of the guy with the big brain and the small brain guy is happier because he's just not thinking that much. That's what Random Access Memories is, and that's what you need sometimes, man. But that doesn't change the fact that Motherboard and Doing It Right are not really the same echelon as the other songs on this album to me. I think Giorgio by Marauder is actually probably one of the best songs in this album. Basically a beautiful sort of suite of what it means to hop into a DAW or hop into a project or hop in with analog equipment and just have no inhibitions headphones and just make some shit. That's what that song is. It's 9 minutes of just make some shit, man. Put that synth loop over the break beat, have a bass solo in there, make everything go away, and there just be strings for a section. It's a beautiful little song. I think it's a beautiful little metaphor for, you know, just like making music creatively, no inhibitions type shit. So yeah, beautiful. Let's keep going. Cowards by Squid. Squid's cool. I listened to Bright Green Field back in November, I think, and that was a cool album because it was violent and experimental and crazy and abrasive, and the lead singer sounded like he was on heroin. But Cowards by Squid is kind of disappointing because it's the insane aspect of what Squid does, except just not executed really. Because the lead singer's vocals, I don't know what his name is of Squid, but he does this really interesting thing with his voice, which worked really well on the first album, which made it sound like he was like dying in a very vulgar way every time he would release a note or something like that. And it was very cathartic and like rah and like awesome, right? But on Cowards, the way his vocals are processed, the way he's stacked, the way he just fits into the songs, it sounds so melodramatic and just honestly not mixed, and it just doesn't sound good. So these moments where it should be like a violent guffaw of like vulgarity from his voice, it just sounds like some dude going like, "And up for you, and up for you, and up for you." It's not very flattering to listen to or perceive in my headphones, so I'm not a big fan of that. And I just came out of this disappointed because they had the formula down with Bright Green Field. Everything was there, the mixing, the mastering, the energy. So that was disappointing, but hey, you gotta have a few duds sometimes you listen to albums. You know what I mean? Not every album is a perfect tenor. You know, there's some cool enough instrumental moments. There's a part of one of the songs where it just like morphs into like a bunch of bleeps and bloops and boom boom beep boom 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 beep boom boom beep boom boom beep boom. And it sounds really cool. And the song kind of turns into like a percussive glitch fest for like a solid minute, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, it's all I can really remember. Let's just keep going. First Light by Makoto Matsushita. I had to read that off the notes real quick. This is one of those chill Japanese type fusion albums that you see on your recommended with like a big beagle. Like it's like one of those albums that you'd see on YouTube, and it was pretty chill. Not too memorable, just a good background vibe. That's pretty much all I gotta say. I listened to it. I did listen to it, and my opinions on that were said. So let's keep going. EP2 by JPEG Mafia. This comes from an era where Peggy just released EP and EP2 before he released LP, and it came after All My Heroes Are Cornballs and before the LP era, his next album. So this is sort of like the transitional period, and what I find really interesting actually is that if you analyze this, you can kind of see where the transition takes place, because the instrumentals tend to get starker and more nocturnal towards LP. I mean, All My Heroes Are Cornballs was like the zaniest instrumentals ever, right? And you're kind of getting some deflation of that. But that being said, JPEG Mafia's vocal style and zany delivery is still here from All My Heroes Are Cornballs, and it slowly gets baked down throughout the EP series. So you like on songs like Bodyguard, it's like pretty much an LP instrumental with an All My Heroes Are Cornballs lyrical approach. That's kind of how I look at this era. Peggy's using his voice with really interesting nocturnal, dystopian sounding auto tunes and making his sort of own brand of just like R&B that sounds like it was like a little bit out of tune, sounds like it's a little bit off. It's honorable to make. I think it's pretty cool, and yeah man, pretty nice. Let's keep going. Melt My Eyes, See Your Future by Denzel Curry. I'm appreciating the beats a lot on this album. The beats are crazy. JPEG Mafia produces a beat on this thing, but really what this album offers to me more than anything is like a lyrical therapy session. It feels like Denzel is, you know, more reading us a storybook tale on what it means to grow and be strong and resilient and analyze yourself more than it is him rapping to us. Melt My Eyes in this whole metaphor seems to be a metaphor for like, you know, just like letting it wash over you maybe. Like when your eyes melt, I'm guessing you can't see, you know what I mean? So you're just sort of subject to the energy around you. You're sort of just going through it. You got to let it wash over you. I don't know. That's kind of how I take it. And yeah, this album was very helpful for me this month because, like I said, very cathartic little mental month for me and my creative process and all that. And this one really helped me and made me feel good about myself. Listened to it earlier today, yesterday, just kind of been in rotation a lot. And yeah, let's keep going. Next one. Magical Ohashi Junko no Sokai 3 by Junko Ohashi. This is some more background J-pop music stuff, just like overly pop, cliche, female vocal, Sukuno Ionia. But imagine that being a girl, like that kind of stuff, the, you know, giant Miami Vice, neon, glistening oceans, and you know, bright glossy glossy vignettes of like this person being at the beach and the waves are glistening and the seagulls in the air and the still photos are sort of vignetting and transitioning each other into themselves in this 2D animation format. That's kind of the vibe of this album, and that's really about it. Female vocal lead this time around, more cool chords. The only reason I've been listening to a lot of these J-pop albums is simply because like I loved listening to Masayoshi Takanaka, and I didn't really want to listen to more Takanaka. I wanted to listen to more around his scene. Like what does Takanaka do differently that just the cliche stuff doesn't do? Like how does Takanaka make a name for himself within his own scene, within his own time period? And I'm kind of listening to these albums as like, okay, this is like the basic stuff, and Takanaka is the Takanaka version. Just getting more fluent in that whole scene, Japanese beach pop 80s shit. So yeah, pretty cool. But next album, let's keep going. Flower Boy by Tyler. I listened to this one getting coffee, and what I was thinking about to myself this time around was that the percussions are so awesome because they make stuff sound very nature-y. If you listen to Forward, the shakers, the way those are mixed, they're mixed like they're grasshoppers chirping. Like subconsciously you hear some maybe like some outside nature sundown sounds or something. And I said Garden Shed has great production because it does. Next album, Igor by Tyler. Again, I listened to this one, still awesome. Just wrote that I still really like listening to it. I'll come back to it every once in a while, you know, for a song or two, and then I'll just like listen to the whole thing because the lo-fi textures are just so cool. Like we need more albums that like aren't afraid to be a little bit messy. I think that's what really interests me musically, is like when stuff is a little bit off or a little bit more messy, because we've all heard what the perfect vocal take sounds like, or what the perfect drums sound like, or whatever, or the thing that hits the most, right? The trap drum and the trap kick and the trap hi-hat. But I want some more songs like New Magic Wand, where the bass, I don't even know what the notes it's playing are. It's like so blown out, and the hi-hats are literally like rattling spoons that sound like they were cracked through like an MP3 to YouTube file folder or something. I don't like, we need more of that, you know what I mean? And that's what Igor provides me, and it gives me a really cool feeling about music when I listen to it. I'm just like, man, this is so awesome. Like we could do this, you know what I mean? Like, fuck yeah. Let's move on. Utopia by Travis Scott. Listen to this album, really appreciate the HD elements. Hyena, I remember when that came out, I was absolutely blown away. I was like, whoa! And I listening back to it, I'm like, yeah, it's still pretty cool. But as I was listening, I was thinking, like, what would like people from like the 90s, the 2000s, or like the Eminem era of rap think of Travis Scott? Because he's a completely different MC to the ones we would get back then. Like, people listen to Travis not for his MC material or his lyrical appeal, but because he gives them sort of carnival worlds of psychedelic sound, right? I wonder if you showed like an Eminem fan from like 2001 like Utopia, if he would think it was like good, or if there'd be any merit to it, or if he would just think like, what even is this? They'd probably think it was like for kids, like cartoon versions of albums where like the lyrics don't matter, it's just like how the thing sounds. Oh, it sounds cool, that's for kids, right? I don't know. That's kind of how I would think of it maybe if I was in 2001, I heard Utopia for the first time. Weird thought, I know, but that's what I was thinking about, and it's literally like the only note I have. So, next album, Bad Cameo by James Blake and Lil Yachty. This album's pretty weird because it feels like the one no one asked. It's like the Captain America Brave New World of albums, kind of. It's such a random venture. You got two random people making an album together, and it's called Bad Cameo. Like, the album title itself is referencing the fact that, like, these people shouldn't be working together, I feel like. But this could have been really cool. You know what I mean? James Blake is really awesome. Lil Yachty does experimental ventures, and he's shown he can take risks with, like, Let's Start Here and stuff. But this one just didn't really do anything for me. It's just a really sleepy album. Like, James Blake is really overextending his sleepy bag on this thing. He's producing the songs very wide. There's a lot of space in these things. He's producing his vocals with a lot of space. Lil Yachty with a lot of space. Like, he's making everything as spacious as possible, but there's nothing to grab onto. It just sounds like a sleepy, ambient album, kind of. And when Lil Yachty does his thing on the album, it's not like he's really switching it up or doing anything too different. He's sort of just doing his usual shtick. And sometimes he's even like doing like the vibrato thing, or bringing up like things like Searching for the Sun like he did on Let's Start Here. Like, he's not like in a different mindset for this album. He's not in like a different focus. He's just being Lil Yachty on another album. It's kind of how I feel. It's not like the best album, really. You could take 4 of these songs, put them on an EP, slap them together, release it. It would give me the same appeal. I don't think you really need a full album of this. I think it would work better as an EP. But as always, though, I know it sounds cliche probably at this point, I do appreciate it existing, because two people coming together who don't really really collab, or people don't really expect to collab, and just coming out and making something very violently different from what they've made before is very inspiring in its own right. And even though this album doesn't really pan out more than like a 4 out of 10 for me or something, I still am very appreciative they went together, they did it, they committed to it, they made something at least pretty interesting. But next album, In Waves by Jamie XX. Sharp little dance album. I don't really listen to too much dance music. This was one of the first dance albums I've really listened to. It really kind of makes me stop and think about like how much effort goes into like tuning these kicks and tuning these snare compressors and stuff to make music like this, because when you have just like dance music where the main pull is like the punch of each ingredient, the punch of the kick, the way the snare hits, the way the sample comes into play, like you got to really think about every single sound in this rhythmic 4x4 notation having its own frequency and its own way it blooms and its own like way of fitting, and that's gonna be really hard to figure out. And I was thinking about that listening to this. But this album's pretty cool. I didn't know I really dig house music this much, but it's very meditative, it's very cool. And Jamie XX, the way he produces house music almost kind of reminds me of the way Kanye would produce like a hip-hop song or something. Just seems very free with the format of making his genre. You know what I mean? Like he isn't afraid to get experimental, get weird with it, maybe throw in some messy textures here and there just for the fun of it, because he knows the core of music maybe is to have a little bit of fun and be cheeky and not exactly be so anal and pretentious. And that's kind of what I get about Jamie XX just from his production. He doesn't even say a word on this album. That's just kind of the aura I feel from him. But yeah, next album, Playing Robots in the Heaven by James Blake. James Blake dropped the Yachty, right? You know what I mean? I listened to this album probably like a year ago, low-key, and I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. I thought it was like weird. I thought it was like just unfinished, really. See, back then I listened to Playing Robots in the Heaven, and I kind of thought, oh, this is like just an instrumental demo beat tape. This is like something Oscar Tate would make for people out there who are cultured, because there was really no sequencing and half of it was ambient, and there was like 3 tracks in the smack dab middle of the album that were just like trap beats, and I was like, what's going on here? But now I come back to it and I realize, no, this is a love letter to analog synths. This is a love letter to making music with the blips and bloops and the robot sounds that we all know and love, and also just like the texture of actually pressing on the pad sometimes too. Like there's some sounds in here where he's using the texture of pressing on the pad and that little silicon pluck you get as like a texture, and that's like the hi-hat for a song or something, you know what I mean? So I get it now. This is a love letter album. This is something that is very niche and is very interesting to me now, and I get it, and I understand why the 3 tracks in the middle are trap songs now. It's because it's just the love of the game of making music on analog equipment, and this is a representation of it. You know, it's cool. It's very brutalist too. A brutalist, big word, good, big movie too also, but it feels like a brutalist album, like a giant concrete slab. That's Playing Robots into Heaven. I think is cool, and let's move on. You Like Music by Death's Dynamic Shroud and Galen Tipton. This is also an album I didn't get when I first heard it a while ago. I don't know, back when it came out, and the reason I didn't get it was because I had listened to Death's Dynamic Shroud's Dark Life. Now, Dark Life is an album that blew me away when I heard it. I thought it was the next stage of electronic music. Like we just got something new out of the reactor. Like the incubation period has ended. We have like the Tyrannosaurus Rex, albino, combined Jurassic World, whatever the fuck raptor shit out of the incubation. This is the next stage of music. And when I listened to You Like Music, which was another project by Death's Dynamic Shroud, I sort of came to it like, oh, this isn't really as grand or as insane as I was expecting. And that's because I was expecting something. Really, I shouldn't have been expecting an EDM album that I got with Dark Life. This is an EDM album that is purely for fun. This is almost like a mixtape EDM album, where it feels like these 2 producers got together and said, hey, let's make 10 tracks for people just for fun. Let's make the most unpretentious EDM album possible. And, you know, doing it in a way that's rooted in like video game samples and like sort of just like the online, terminally online sort of experience or whatever. There are titles of these songs like 2049, Hero Brian, or something like that. I think there's one called like No Dreams, Smoke Tip, or like, I don't know. It feels very carefree. Listening to just the EDM instrumentals and just the aspects of it, I'm not getting any hint of pretension. Usually there's like an EDM sort of community out there that's kind of pretentious with how they mix their kicks and their snares, and they're kind of elitist about how their compressors look and shit like that. But the energy I get from You Like Music is that these are just 2 producers who happen to really love making weird electronic music, and they're making it in a very carefree way. Something that's just like, hey, you know, I like music, you like music, here's some rhythms, here's some vibes, here's some 16th notes and eighth notes and combinations of rhythms and shit like that and weird sound effects. And here you go. And it's cool. It's like a little care package for people who like weird shit. Next album, Atta Vista by Childish Gambino. This is a unique project. People might remember it as like the one he dropped in 2020 as the 31520, but he re-released it as Atta Vista with like more polished mixes and stuff like that. And I actually like it a lot. It's my favorite Childish Gambino project, and that's because it's just the most impossible to pin down. Like, I don't really know where all these ideas are coming from, where the motivations are, but they all blend in a way. Like when I start the album and when I finish the album, I get a unique blend of vibe and experience that all makes sense in a cohesively interesting way. And you know, I'm just kind of entranced by it. I don't know how a song like Final Church exists. I don't know how you start with a song like Psilocybin. I love the inflections that Donald is using through Psilocybin. The melodies, the rhythm, the energy of that song is generational, one of one. I just think there's a lot in this album that maybe people should listen back for. It's really cool. It's a really cool album that makes pop music a little bit more darker, a little bit more interesting, a little bit more industrial. It gives pop music a sort of dystopian bite that I can't tangibly place, but you have to listen to really feel it, which is what music pretty much is, right? So shout out Atta Vista, and let's keep going. After Angel by Death's Dynamic Shroud. I can't remember too much about this project. I remember it was a bit choppy. I listened to it because I liked You Like Music, and I was on a Death's Dynamic Shroud sort of binge, like, okay, let's see what else they got for us, right? But this one is like more laid back beats as opposed to Dark Life or others. And Death's Dynamic Shroud is 3 people, and they released like 3 albums in 2023, this being one of them. And so maybe they split them up against each other. I don't know. It's just their 2023 albums they released don't seem like the same amount of cumulative effort. This album just doesn't feel like it had a lot of effort compared to like Dark Life or something else. It just didn't really stick with me. I can't remember anything really out of it, and that's kind of unfortunate, but it's what happens. You know what I mean? So that's After Angel for me. Let's keep going. Midnight Tangerine by Death's Dynamic Shroud. This one also released the same year as this last album I was talking about. And you know, this is not an album I was expecting either. This is a different vibe completely. And it's basically like a fantasy storybook anime electronic music album. The lead singer is singing like a dubbed anime protagonist the whole time. Like, if I was with you and you would see me. Some shit like that. I don't know. But that's kind of what this album is. And I don't really like that type of music. I don't jive with it, but I can at least listen to it. You know what I mean? Like, I have the ability to not turn it off, and that's what I did. But there is an interesting song called Hologram World, which kind of reminds me of like the Real Human Being song from Drive. That one's pretty cool, if not a little bit uppity, happy, campy, giving you a wink at the camera, maybe like 3 winks. It's actually pretty on the nose. It's trying to be the most campy song it can be. It's like, you live in a hologram world. It's just like, it's so camp you might as well bring the s'mores in the tent. You know what I'm saying? But weird album that I'm not coming back to. I don't really think that much. Let's keep going. 2020 by Joe, DJO, Joe Keery, the guy from The Strangers. He comes out with a uniquely very retro, interesting sort of rock, alt-rock, indie album. I don't know. This whole thing sounds like it's recorded on analog tape, or it comes from like a different time or something. There's a funk in there. There's a smell to this album that smells like retro. I don't know. I like it. It's cool. It's a nice little vibe. It's simple. It's not trying to blow you away or anything. It's just giving you a bunch of cool little songs that are kind of, they just exist in this funk, bro. I don't know how else to explain it. Really not too much to say, except it's refreshing. I like this style more than his more commercial stuff he's doing now. Like when Joe releases a song like Basic Being Basic, I just listen to it and I'm like, man, yeah, that's made for Walmart. That's made for a Hallmark ad or something, or that's made for, you know, I don't know, like new shoes, back to school sale, you know what I mean? It's kind of unfortunate because 2020 I feel like is really interesting. You have songs like, you know, Flash Mountain, you have Personal Lies. I mean these are Roddy. I mean, these are pretty interesting sort of complex pop songs, and with their own experimental ventures in between them with this retro style. But now we're getting more commercial, we're getting more glossy, we're getting a little bit more not as interesting to me. But that's okay, because I'm probably still gonna listen to his music, mostly because I just like listening to music. But yeah, next album. Alligator Bites Never Heal by Doechii. Admittedly, I was a bit skeptical. I've never heard Doechii before. I saw she won the Grammy. Very cool. Congratulations. My guy Haji did a video for her, which kind of broke down her career before she was a musician. And she was like a YouTuber vlogger for like 8 years. That was crazy. Also did the thumbnail for his video. Shout out Haji. But I decided to check out this album, and yeah, man, it checks really all the boxes. Her personality is addicting. She's like, she doesn't take herself too seriously. It's just kind of a fun time. One thing that I can't really get over though is, why did it win a Grammy? You know what I mean? Because the beats are a bit not too samey. It's not like there's any insane concept going on or there's any insane flow. It sounds like a collection of 14 songs from somebody who's just good at making music. And I feel like if you're gonna get a Grammy, like it should be for the highest echelon. And this just kind of seems like some fun songs that happen to be, you know, sequenced pretty well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not hating. I'm very happy she got the Grammy. But like, what does a Grammy even mean is kind of my question. What's the notoriety of that thing? I don't know. I mean, if I'm talking about it still, you're talking about it, we're tuning in. People are crying up on stage when they get them, so I guess it has some sort of emotional notoriety around, right? But that's February. That's the albums I listened to. What albums did you listen to? Make your own video and then post the link in the comments. But this month, yeah, weird, cathartic, but optimistic, and set me on the right track. And musically, always good. You know, I'm very grateful I have ears to experience the vibration of sound I get to experience. Music is so awesome. I'm making some new music myself. Thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for, you know, finding value in my yap, I guess. I'm gonna continue with these no matter the month, no matter the mindset, hopefully, is the idea. Just like talking about music, I like seeing the months go up like a tally, you know what I mean? Like we're 4 in, that's kind of cool. But stay safe out there, you know what I mean? If it's raining, get yourself an umbrella. If it's storming, get yourself an umbrella or two. And yeah, I will see y'all. I'm gonna go study for a physics final or midterm now because I'm a college student and I have no time. So I will see y'all. I'm gonna press stop recording here in 3, 2, 1, goodbye.